Hello, everyone. I want to talk a little bit about our OIP, our district goals, and mostly about our specific building goals. So I'm going to take a little bit of time this morning, maybe about 20 minutes, to go through this. And like I indicated in a previous email, I want everyone, if you have questions, if you need clarification, how am I supposed to do this? What am I supposed to do? I will be happy to sit down with individuals, groups of folks. But one of my goals this year is to be really intentional and kind of working with you to work through these goals and do a good job, because ultimately I think these goals are so appropriate. And as we kind of go through this, we'll talk more and more as to why we feel they're appropriate. But if you look first at our district goals, of course, up at the top, improve students' literacy skills, K-12. That obviously, with our literacy grant that we were so fortunate to get, is going to be a huge focus across our district for years to come. And Dover Middle School will be more and more involved in the years to follow. But of course, we will be doing things as we have in the past several years to support that overall district OIP goal. The second being mathematical and scientific reasoning. Teaching kids how to think like a mathematician, how to think like a scientist, being able to problem solve is so important, and it's such an important skill. And I think our science and math folks are going to be excited about these goals, because I think we really have the tools to make those goals happen for kids in a meaningful way. With the onset of our new math series, our science teachers continue to use Fusion. The work that you folks have done with Google Classroom in terms of being able to assess and do some data analysis, there's a lot of things in place for us to work on that second goal. And then thirdly, the social and emotional learning goal, which I feel is so timely. If you look at all the information coming out from our state level about the importance of social emotional, especially in this pandemic and students coming back from different situations that we all know for so many of our students was very difficult. And we don't completely know when school starts on September 8th what exactly their state of mind will be. And you guys just went through a training on trauma. And honestly, some of our kids have been through a trauma, maybe all of them in various degrees. So that's a very important learning goal that we will tie into as a building. So let me get into Dover Middle School's building goals and kind of the rationale thereof, and go from there. So first, our goal number one is assessment data and data analysis will drive our instruction for the 2021 school year. And this ties into district goal number one and number two. And this has been an ongoing thing. I think as a building, we've gotten better and better with this, but I think we need to take even more intentional steps towards this goal. And we're going to do that in a number of ways. One of the first things we're going to do as a building, and this is every teacher, whether you're a core teacher or even an elective teacher, I think we need to build assessments into our practice more often. Assessments, I feel, the research, supports is critical in terms of finding out where kids are in the curriculum at a given moment, and then adjusting our instruction accordingly. And I think that's critical. And so we're going to make sure as a building that we're building sufficient amount of both quiz type and test type assessments into our practice. And that's going to be our primary focus that we're looking at. Not that other things aren't considered as well, but I think that's number one. We need to make sure we're assessing kids enough. Okay, so number one, teachers will administer a minimum of 4 quiz-type assessments each 9-week grading period. Common Core teachers, I think at this point we've done this enough years. And I think most of you are already doing this. We're going to use the exact same assessment, and the timing of that should be very close to one another. Each quiz will be analyzed by the teacher to identify student strengths and weaknesses relative to the learning standards. Science, social studies, and elective teachers will build literacy type questions into their assessments. And I've enclosed or attached for you folks all the learning standards, but on 62, you get specific to science and social studies connections, but I believe our other elective teachers can tie into those as well. Okay, so number 2, you're very familiar with number 2. Students will be identified for redo and retakes. And the reason I have it as an action step, I don't want to leave this to students to decide, oh, I need to go to the teacher and make sure I get my redo retakes. We as the instructional leaders in the classroom, I believe we have to go to students and say, look, this is where you're at. You're not ready for whatever the next thing is. We need to do some remediation and get you to where you need to be. Because it is about grade, but it's not about grade. It's about, do they have the prerequisite skills to move forward? So I think we have to be very intentional about relaying that information, explicitly telling students, look, you need to do a redo retake. And then 3 is, here's a specific protocol that we will follow to make sure you have done what's required before you do a retake or a redo of a quiz. And I think we're all in agreement that it isn't acceptable for a kid just to go up to your desk and say, okay, I failed this quiz, I want to retake. There needs to be a specific protocol spelled out. Most of you already have these things in place. And then what we're also saying that the bigger type assessments, the assessments over a bigger chunk of content, I know what a concern is going to be is, well, geez, I can't give a test here because I haven't finished this chapter. We don't have to go by the textbook necessarily. We can decide, and that's what you're going to need to do, is kind of look at your curriculum and make decisions as to, okay, how can I make sure I'm getting 2 tests built into the 9-week grading period. But then number 5 and number 6, I think it's critical that each quiz will be analyzed by the teacher to identify student strengths and weaknesses relative to the learning standard. So I gave a quiz. Over proportions, and how did my class do? How did my individual students do relative to the standards in that particular case? And I'm assuming in most cases there will be pieces and parts. There will be various standards covered on one quiz, and especially one test. But this data, number 6, the data analysis will reveal standards that will require reteaching and or spiraling throughout the year. And I guess I meant that one more from a test assessment, because even though it's a test and we're saying, okay, we're kind of cutting off that part of the curriculum and we're moving on, that does not mean there aren't certain, we used to call them power standards that are essential moving forward that maybe we need to spiral back and reteach. And so being able to look at those test assessments and make decisions as to which of those need to be followed up on at a later time. So, and then the next one, I think ties into what we've been saying. Test quizzes and other in-class performance will account for a minimum of 80% of the student grade. And the rationale there is, we feel like as a building, we need to have a greater focus on learning and achievement. And at the end of the day, one of the best ways to assess learning and achievement is through quizzes and tests, because you have them in the room. They have a finite amount of time, and we have to find out, okay, what do they know, what do they not know, and then we need to adjust accordingly. So, and at the end of the day, if we're going to tailor our instruction to students, we have to know where they're weak, where they're strong. So, and then assessments serve to inform instruction and identify strengths and weaknesses. So I kind of already said that. But also it provides more consistent feedback to students and parents as to achievement levels. Parents need to know where does Johnny stand in terms of the curriculum, and these assessments help provide that. And also, to be honest with you, across the building, we need to develop greater consistency with that. I think it's a fairness issue, it's an equity issue, and I'm never going to say we have to be exactly the same, but I think we have to have a minimum. So I have 4 quizzes on here. Don't think that's not a maximum. I believe in quizzes. I used to give quizzes all the time as a teacher, and it's a snapshot. It's where they are at a given moment, but I believe it helps us to make adjustments accordingly. The tests are more summative. I get that. It's okay. At some point, the redos and retakes, and that's been the conversation in our building. The redo and retakes has to be over, and we're moving forward. So that is more summative, but I do, obviously between the quizzes and the test, that should add up to at least 80% of that grade. And then, okay, so what are you going to do with this? What I've tried to do is be very consistent for my sake, for your sake, and that I'm going to want this stuff the day grades are due at the end of the 9 weeks. So each teacher will share the following via the format of their choosing with, I'm just going to say myself. I think that'll just make it easier rather than Kurt. So share with me I want your quizzes for and the data analysis with that, and I want your test assessments and the analysis with that. So that's the biggie. That's the one that each teacher may have to make some adjustments in terms of how we go about things, but I wouldn't have it on here if I didn't think it was pretty important. So moving on to goal 2. I think teachers are really excited about this panorama resource that we now have. And I think it's important and critical, useful that we do something with that resource. So this one here, you'll have a lot more flexibility, but teachers will utilize panorama software with fidelity in order to could be identified tier 2 and tier 3 kids, or it could be other strategic groups of students. But I think you're going to want to do tier 2 and tier 3, as these are the kids that we are identifying as they need something more. Okay, that's essentially when you look at the tier model, that's what that says. But I don't want to limit it to that, because you can use Panorama for all kinds of things. This is an area where maybe my elective teachers have a particular group of kids they want to focus in on and monitor and track progress. I believe you can do that with this system. So I'm really excited, but if you look at the action steps, each group and our individual teacher will create 3 to 4 SMART groups based upon the criterion of their choosing using the Panorama software. For example, a team may group according to gifted, tier 2, tier 3, SEL concerns. But I didn't want to limit it to saying it had to be teams, because as you folks know, kids are coming into the building. It's going to be more difficult to have team meetings where we're talking about kids. I think we could still do team meetings where we're not orally or out loud saying kids' names and information and stuff like that. We could maybe do a Google Meet as kids are coming in the morning. I think that's all going to be the level of consistency and the routine that each team establishes and each individual teacher establishes. But anyway, my point is, this can be kind of a collective group kind of an activity. And I think with teams, we're definitely going to want that to some extent, but it also lends itself for individual teachers doing some things as well. So I'm really excited about that one. I'm really excited about what Panorama can do for us. And so that's goal 2. Now, goal 3 and 4 are stuff that we're going to be working on, and it does tie into our district goals, but it's not going to be, for lack of a better phrase, as labor intensive as maybe goal 1 and to some extent goal 2. But goal 3 is PBIS, Thriving Learning Communities, Character Education. That's some of the work that Jared Hall had reached out to this organization, and we had a few sample notebook materials related to this. What I'm thinking with this PBIS is we're going to try to get a group of core teachers that are interested, trained, and then it's going to be kind of teach the teacher this year, and we will try to implement some of these things in tornado time. Now, to what extent, how many days a week, I'm going to rely on our BLT team and your feedback as to how much we want to do that. I'm thinking maybe one a week or maybe one every 2 weeks. I want to kind of go slow until we get wrap our arms around it. But I definitely want to work towards that this year and really have it up and running full go for next year. So that's goal 3. And then goal 4, and that's me. This goal 4 is essentially, and you can read more about this when you look at the OIP, the district OIP goals that I shared with you. But we're essentially taking a deep dive into our RTI process and trying to come up with greater consistency, more meaningful intervention strategies, and a better protocol through our RTI process. But this will primarily be this year through our BLT team. And so most folks won't necessarily have to do a lot with that this year. So those are our 4 goals. And like I said, I think goal 1 and goal 2 are the ones that will, and especially goal 1 is probably going to be where you spend more of your time. But I really believe, like I keep saying, that these are going to help move us forward, and probably some things we should have had in place for a while. And also, when I talked to Tennille and we went through this together, a lot of this stuff is what we're going to see more and more in the years to come, as I really feel good about the fact that our district has maybe more of a clear strategic plan than it has. So that's our goals. Again, reach out to me, ask questions, let's talk through these. But I really feel good that you folks have the tools in place to do a fantastic job with these. And at the end of the day, what's it about? It's about moving kids forward. And let's face it, we're going to have a real challenge this year, and we have to be data driven. We have to be focused on meeting the kids where they're at and moving forward. So I thank you for listening. Have a great day.